Okay, now that we have sokonalysis installed, we just need to get started. What's about the tool and how to use it. You can use this terminal, just type sokonalysis as root on the terminal, then you can run it. The first option we have is Control Q, which is exit. Coming up to the next thing on the header of the application, from the file which contains exit, or let's just say closing the application, we have another special thing called the view. Okay, so under the view, what is contained, you can change the theme for this application. By default it will run in light mode, so if you want you can change it to dark mode by just saying switch theme. Okay, so if you want to switch the theme again, you can either use the shortcut which is Ctrl Shift T. So we also have the AI feature here, so if you want you can just tell the assistant to say switch theme. Okay, so once you say switch theme, it will switch the theme for you, then it will even tell you the shortcut which was used. So if you want you can do it manual again, Ctrl Shift T. So if you want to clear what the assistant AI has written, you can just press on it just like that. So apart from the switch theme under view, we have the home shortcut which is Ctrl H. So when do we use this option? Suppose you are under symmetric, you can either say view then home, or you can simply say Ctrl H. Now apart from that, we have the layout. So by default, the layout for this application will land on the default mode or layout, so which is already this. So this is the default layout. So you can even change to the compact layout, where now it becomes smaller. Okay, then you can also change to the wide layout. So in my case I would rather use default. Then we also have the tools. So under the tools, this shows the list of all the 5 major categories. Now where can we use this particular shortcut? So suppose I was in hashing, but I've just realized to say I would like to switch to asymmetric. So instead of me saying Ctrl H to go to home and navigate to asymmetric, I would simply just say tools then asymmetric, so that way it's easier for me to navigate from one location to the other. Okay, so Ctrl H to go back to the home again. So now we have the config. So start off with the word list settings. Okay, so under practice, I'll go to the crypto or cryptography category. We have a challenge which is called the boss message. I would just like to download this particular file which is called boss message.zip. So I'll navigate to downloads. So once I double click on the boss message.zip, we can see that we have some files, but there's a password. Let's just say a word list is a list of passwords. Suppose I'm just a beginner with CTF, I don't know what's happening. So we can drag this particular zip file to get an understanding using our AI assistant. So this can be processed using documents, and then you navigate to zip. Then you need the word list configured, so click here or just open word list under configuration, which is there. Then after that it says click here to open zip file. So zip file happens to be a category in this particular application. So the good part about this drag and drop thing on the AI assistant, it can navigate you directly to where you need to go, like this. Instead of you, for example, you are on the home page, then you say advanced, then you go in documents, then you go to zip file. So that way you can easily navigate if you're just a beginner and you don't know what's happening. So I'll go with standard rules now. we need to drop our zip file here, for which I'll do. You need to configure a word list, because you cannot start cracking. You can see it saying no word list. So I'll come on config, then word list setting, navigate where it says root or your file system. Then you need to find this folder, which is SUR. Then you need to go in share. Then under share you find word lists. So inside this word list folder now, terms of size is locq.txt. So you can drag it to your desktop and say extract here, so that next time you don't need to navigate through all this. Okay, you need to drag and drop a word list here, or you can browse. So now let's say save word list. Okay, now once we do that, you can see that the word list is ready and we can start cracking. So the important feature again we have on each and every page, the status. So it will show you what's happening and what's being done and in the background. We were splitting this particular word list, okay, into 8 parts, and the password was found, which is now 1337. So I can either say copy, or I can copy there. Now for this to work, you need to make sure that the requirements are checked. Okay, so in this case our requirements was just John the Ripper, which is John, then zip to John, which is part of John the Ripper itself. So if they are not installed, this option will allow you to install, or you can do it manually. So I'll say extract again, then I'll use that password for which we found. So we can see that we have extracted this. Let's see what's inside here. So this looks like a flag. Okay, now we don't know what cipher this is. So what we need to do, we need to understand, maybe this photo gives us some information. So I'd like to open my terminal here. I'll run it as root first. Then I would like to see simple things about this photo. For example, I like to use exif2. Okay, so exif2 and the name of the photo, which is this may help. Okay, so I just want to see if there are some hidden information here. Nothing is hidden. Okay, now this takes us to another step. So if nothing is hidden, it means if the metadata is just okay, meaning somehow there's information inside that photo, which takes us to steganography. So I'll say Control H. Now here I'll use the AI by just typing steg, okay, which is short for steganography. Okay, so in our case we are trying to extract data, which is now extracting hidden data from a stego file with a password or brute force. So in this case, by stego file, we mean a potential file like that one we've seen, which can contain information. So we'll go and extract. So the first thing, we need to drag the image which we suspect as information, which is this may help. So in this case, let's try no password. Okay, so let's see if we can extract this thing without a password. So let's say extract with no password. Then on the status here again, it's just giving us some information, what's happening. Then now we can see we have the message. Now here there are 2 hints which are given. The first one is that the cipher they used is Virginia. Okay, the second thing is that we need to use some tools such as John the Ripper to crack a particular thing, for which we've already done. We've used John in sokonalysis to extract that zip file. Now the requirements for this one, all you need to have is steghide and stegseek. So I'll go to home. Since I know where it is, I can just say symmetric, Caesar cipher, pod alphabetic, then keyword based, which is Virginia cipher itself. So first of all, we need to choose the mapping style. Now, what's the keyword? Okay, now here it's interesting, they haven't told us anything about the keyword, but we have a photo for which looks like Morgan Freeman. Okay, so you can see that this is our guy now, Morgan Freeman. So there's a reason why we are utilizing these two in this case. So CTF is all about knowing the right tools to. So here on the search, you just search Virginia, so decoder, so we put there. So this was the Cipher, so I'll paste it there. Then we'll try out now. We'll start with more, as if we're saying Morgan. So Morgan. Okay, so the key which is Morgan, we can see it's saying yes, yes, that's it. So here the key was supposed to be Morgan. So the key was supposed to be Morgan. So let's try to use this mapping style. Yeah, so we can see we have our flag which is yes, that's it. So the issue which we were having is that I used a mapping style of 1 to A1 up to Z26 instead of using A0 up to Z25. So it sometimes the mapping style differs on how someone can encrypt. No wonder this option is needed here. So here we say submit. Okay, so you can see congratulations, the flag is correct. Now, what about the join settings? Okay, we use this option in a case whereby you were cracking something with an option which requires join the Reaper. For example, we were cracking a zip file which required join the Reaper. So what if in the process of cracking the files which we call the port files in this case, they crash, okay, or they get corrupted? It means you cannot get the correct answers. So you need to clear those port files or the session files. So once you say clear everything, then you say yes, it means now your join the Reaper configurations now are free from errors. So this is where we use these settings. Now we go to quadgram settings. So quadgram settings are similar to a word list but different. Okay, so a word list normally is a .txt, but it can be any extension, but for a quadgram is a JSON file. So when I type something like JSON here, you can see they are telling us quadgram configurations, and it's a 4-letter sequence, frequencies for scoring decryption. So we need to configure it there. Okay, but what is this actually used for? That's what you need to understand. So quadgrams are used when you are using frequency analysis for substitution ciphers. Okay, so for example, when I go in CTF, then under CTF I'll go on substitution cipher, then we'll see we have frequency analysis. So let's take an example of a question and we understand what quadgrams. So here now the category I'll go with is cryptography. Then I'll search for substitution ciphers challenge. So I'll just type sub, short for substitution. So we can see that we have a lot of challenges for substitution ciphers. Okay, so let's try to start off with this one. So I'm not reading what he's saying, I'll just download the file. So let me just open it. So this is how our cipher looks like. So we can see that, okay, somewhere here it looks like our flag, but we cannot decrypt this minus knowing the key. Okay, so that's where I'll use frequency analysis. Test the cipher, then I'll say break Cipher. So under the status, here to show us exactly what's happening. Okay, so here you can adjust the number of rounds you want, but in this case I'll just leave it default. Then you can see we have our flag, which is PicoCTF whatsoever. Just to make sure you change this option to custom. Okay, then you see to say no JSON. Now here there's a trick. Okay, it just doesn't accept any format, but it accepts a particular format, so you need to know about that. So I will say config, then quadgram settings. So here I'll use the same default one which is being used there. So this is the one we are using. Okay, the en.json. Then here now you can see that it has been configured. We have our custom, assuming that you are using your own now. Do the punctuation, the individual words help you to make any substitutions. Okay, so let's try out this one. So now we have this. Okay, so again here we don't see any key, but we see this part which looks more like a flag. Make sure we paste this new info. Try it out. So we can see CTF, short for capture the flag whatsoever. Then with this flag, which is PicoCTF. Now if you look at the hint, is telling us to say the punctuation whatsoever. So instead of saying frequency, they used J. So just change this J to Q. It means you have the correct flag. So this one we can easily see the key, which is this. So if you want, you can go with the known key, or you can use the brute force. So assuming that I know the key, I can just copy the key. Then here I'll use decrypt with known key. So this is the key which we know. Then this is the possible cipher text containing the flag. So you can do this. Then you just say decrypt. So you can see we have the flag. But the good part about this, we don't need to worry about knowing the key whatsoever. We just need to paste the information here. They need to do the magic. So that's the most powerful part about this particular option. So we can even read what they were talking about. Yeah, so that's what we mean by quadgram settings. Now up next we have the help section. So the help section now starts with the user guide. So the user guide, it guides you on how you can use the tool. So that's the user guide. Now we also have the license. So if you would like to go through our license, you can just check out this. So that's the license. Again, we have the check for updates. Always use this option if you want to update your application. And then the about shows you information and the version about this particular application. So for the runtime, it has been 45 minutes, and we've done 15 of operations, with the last one being frequency analysis. So this is important to help you track your last activity. Yeah, so that's a user guide about how to use sokonalysis graphical user interface. So thanks for watching. My name is Soko James, representing Team Sokonalysis. Let's hope you enjoy and download this particular tool. So to reach out to more users, you can simply fork and start the repository. If you don't know how to get this application, watch our video now to install the graphical user interface for sokonalysis. Thank you.